This is Shondell Joyce. Join me in painting this beautiful scene of a storm cloud over the mountains. I'm using ampersand pastel board, and I'm starting with a reference photo that I'm superimposing the rule of thirds on. You can see it on the red transparency. The rule of thirds is a compositional device. I made a value sketch ahead of time to show about where the focal points will land on my rule of thirds. I always start with a value sketch because it's helpful to work out the issues ahead of time rather than in the middle of painting. So having done the value sketch, it gives me an idea of how to better position that storm cloud. Next, I do a color study, which helps me to lay out the palette and to practice the techniques ahead of time before I do them on the painting. So I've decided that there's a hard edge up in the clouds and a dark value that's going to be up in the dark part of the clouds in the bottom. I keep all of my pastels that I'm going to use for this painting in the tray according to value. So that's what I just showed. It's helpful to keep them separated so you don't have to hunt and peck and look for them. I'm going to start off by sketching the rule of thirds, mainly where the lines would intersect on my composition. The very center of this area is considered a no-no zone. I don't want to put the focal point dead center. That's a no-no. Instead, I want to have the focal intersect with one of the cross hairs right about there. So I'm going to make the dark edge of the cloud intersect in that area. And then on the bottom, I'll make another focal area intersect with the bottom intersection. I'm very lightly sketching on my ampersand pastel board using one of the colors that will be in the composition. Here's the next rule of thirds intersection. I don't need to sketch that much to have an idea of where things will fall. Once I get some of the big shapes down in the composition, then I can just lightly indicate where the rain, the cloudburst, is going to appear. I don't want it dead center, so I'm making it side slanted, diagonal. I'm starting with a back to front, and I'm putting some of the color that's going to be behind the clouds first. So this is a warm yellowish golden color, and it's going to be peeking through the clouds. So I want it clean. And in the background, I'm going to use the same color later to scumble some of the rain on top. So I always keep these pastels separated so I don't have to find them again. Next, I'm using a warm white as an underpainting for some of the lights on the edges of the cloud and to fade in some of the gold. I want there to be a hard edge on part of the clouds and a soft edge for the rest. So the lighter color is going to show off where the hard edge will be. Next, I'm using a lavender. Try not to use gray. Gray is a dead color. Anytime you mix black and white, it's a dead color. Instead, look for color temperature, like lavender or light blue. These will give you cooler or warmer tones to your clouds. The lavender creates a nice warm edge up against the yellow-white. Lavender or violet can go either way. It could be warm or cool, depending on what's next to it. So here I'm pushing it to be a little bit warmer by putting it next to yellow. There's also an interesting dynamic with yellow and purple. They're complements, and when you use them together, it creates this composition, this color harmony in your composition. You can see some of the lost and found edges up in the clouds and even in the distant hills. Next, I'm using blue violet. So this is a grayed out blue. You can see the difference between it and a pure blue. So it's closer to a gray than it is to a blue. But it isn't gray. It's got some color temperature to it. It's cool. This cool color helps to push those distant hills into the back. You can see it when it's up close how much cooler it is. This is a beautiful gray. If you don't have some of these colors, try purchasing the Thunderstorm set that Mount Vision makes. Most of the colors I'm using today are Mount Vision pastels from the Thunderstorm set. Some of my favorite colors are in that Thunderstorm set. Here I'm using the same color up in the clouds, and I'm creating an edge between the clouds and the hills. One of the beautiful things about mountains is the clouds often mimic the hills. I'm blocking in heavily with side strokes and putting lots of pigment down on this surface to thicken and create some density. I'm also using the same color as mist on the hills. I'm making it a little bit lighter where the darkest part of the hill is going to intersect. There's always going to be some mist laying in the valley on these hills. Next, I'm using like a puce color. This is a taupe. It's brownish. It isn't a gray, but it's a warmer color. Again, I try to steer clear of gray and instead look at color temperature. This is a warmer, neutral color. Most of my pastels are organized according to value and color temperature. Now, before you have a heart attack, this is an underpainting color, so it isn't going to be the final color I'm putting down here. Instead, it's just to warm up and create a middle value before I cover it with something a little brighter and more intense. Sometimes when you're scumbling, it's helpful to have a color down first and then scumble another color on top of it. That will help the pastel slide over it more easily. So I'm using that earthy color for some of the hills in the distance. Next, I'm using a color slightly lighter than the lavender that I used above and slightly bluer. So this is a cooler and lighter color, and I'm using it as the edge of the cloud. This is where the rain is coming down. It also helps to cool some of the earthy warm color I just put in. And it's a mist color. It's hanging low in that valley. It's going to help to separate the layers of mountains and hills. There's always a little bit of mist in between those hills. I'm putting it up in the higher hill as well. See how it helps to separate those hills? You get a little bit of aerial perspective as the hills start to disappear in the distance. I'm also using a side stroke, more of a linear stroke there, and a side stroke in the big areas. Next, this is a cooler yellow. It's like a goldenrod, and it's the color of the sunburst. So the rain, as it breaks through the cloud, has a warm tinge to it. A little bit of sunlight hitting that. And I'm side stroking at an angle here to pull some of that intense color down onto the mountain. I'm going to put a little bit of that color up in the clouds as well. You never want to put a color dead center and not have it elsewhere. So that's what I'm in the middle of. Next, I'm underpainting on the hill with a taupe that's a little darker and warmer than the version I used before. So it's an earthy brown color. Again, don't have a heart attack. It's an underpainting. There's going to be other colors that are added on top of it. Most of the underpainting I do is a dry underpainting. I don't often use alcohol unless I'm trying to create some kind of a wet vignette look. Instead, I use layers and put them on dry, sometimes with a little bit of blend, sometimes not, depending on the effect I'm going for. Next, I'm darkening some of these hills. This is a dark bluish color. It's like a ultramarine blue if it were paint. And I'm going right on top of some of the warmer earthy colors. This darker color helps to bring that hill forward. Here I'm scumbling it on top of the warm, and that helps to bring forward that hill. I'm using it to separate what's in the valley so that you see the little town that's getting pounded by the rain, and creating some perspective. Next, I'm using my paintbrushes, those clean fingers, to soften and blend. I'm actually using just one finger here and working some of those layers together, pushing and softening that pastel, pushing it into the tooth of the board and softening the edge so that it's a lost edge. I want the found edge to be where the light and the dark intersect. All of this is a lost edge. Here is a really dark Prussian blue. I love this color. It's going to add the drama and storminess in that cloud. It's also going to pull that cloud closer, because the darker the color is, the closer it appears in the composition. So I'm bringing the lower part of the cloud closer to the viewer. I added a little teal to it to cool it towards the middle. I'm probably going to juice this up a little bit more as I go. And I'm softening the edge there so it appears very atmospheric. There's my towel. I always keep a towel in my lap. The rough fabric helps to clean the pastel out of my fingerprints so that when I go back in with my paintbrushes there, my fingers, I start off with a clean finger each time. I'm just very lightly pushing and pulling the edge so that it looks more real and less architectural up in the sky. You never want to have architectural edges. You want them to be soft. Some of them, they can be found edges, just not hard architectural straight lines. Now you're really starting to get a feel that that's sky and clouds, very moody, very dramatic. That's what I'm going for. Love that drama up in the sky. That's the only place drama belongs. Okay, now I'm making sure I have a clean edge on that cloud, just sharpening that edge a touch. Sometimes I go back in and negative space paint with that yellow. Here I'm just gently working the pastel, cleaning it, making sure that the layers of landscape, the hills in the distance, are clear. And those are my found edges. So I'm reasserting those found edges so that they contrast with the lost edges. Lost edges and soft edges are the same thing. Found edges and hard edges are the same thing. It's just different terms for the same concept. Okay, I feel like I've got most of that atmosphere. I just need to blend this one edge, make sure it's soft, so that there's a gradation. I want to soften that. I want to make sure that the edges in the town look hard. I want to soften the edge of the rain. Create a gradation there as well. Take that all the way up to the edge of the cloud. Very lightly touch. It may feel clumsy to blend with your fingers at first, but the more you do it over time, the more comfortable it'll feel to you. Always keep that cloth handy. And if you're blending, blend the light areas first, very delicately work that pastel together. You're breaking the pigments when you blend. Whenever you touch them, you're breaking them and combining them. It's the same as if you were mixing paint on a palette. So when I blend, I'm conscious of the fact that I am combining pigments at this moment. I try to do the light ones first, then I clean my brushes and then move to the next color, so that way I'm not polluting the colors too much. And here I'm softening that edge so it looks a little more natural. You're getting some of that cloud burst. I'm softening the mist around the edges. Now it's starting to look like some perspective in this painting. I'm just going back in, doing a little touch up here and there, creating some edges, losing some others. At this point, I am ready to reassert some of the edges. This is a beautiful blue, and I'm just pulling it in to create the edge of the cloud. This helps to give the illusion of rain. In Florida, the clouds seem to rip apart and burst open with rain. Other parts of the world, it's a gentle thing that comes upon you, but here and on the mountains as well, they seem to just open up like a zipper and unleash the rain. So I'm pulling some of that rain down. I'm really liking this effect now. There's going to be another step to this. It's not finished. I'm going to scumble with this beautiful golden color. I make sure it's clean by wiping it, and then I use the whole side of it. Just very lightly scumble. I clean the pastel again and lightly scumble. So each stroke I'm making, I'm cleaning that pastel before I apply it again. Now I have a cohesive feel to the rain coming from the cloud. There's some actual particles of rain. It really feels like rain. I also want to incorporate that beautiful yellow color down below in the town, so I'm putting little puddles, little bits of light, a little yellow, and that helps to break up the landscape. I'm going to go ahead and incorporate some of the other colors. This is the taupe I use for the underpainting, and I'm just putting little touches, little dots and dashes, just some marks to create texture. Here I'm bringing some of that lavender from the cloud down into the town, making some edges on the trees in the town, making what may read like water or wet sand. Here's some of the dark bluish gray color, bringing it down into the town. I try to work the same colors through the whole composition to create color harmony. And again, this is a yellow-purple composition. So all of the colors I'm using are genetically related to yellow and purple. And I pull them throughout the whole composition. Here's some of that beautiful warm white. That's a yellowish white. And I'm just creating a few little highlights on it, like parts of the town are catching that light. It really reads like a town now, and all it is just a few little squiggles, a few little marks. You don't need to clearly define every little building and light for it to read like a town. As a matter of fact, the more you leave to the imagination, the more you create closure in your viewers' minds, the more interesting the painting is. Spelling everything out is never a good idea. Nobody wants to see every brick in that wall or every tree in that forest. I'm just using a few little marks, little daubs to make those trees. The shapes of the trees and the color of the dark in the foreground is going to be the same color that I'm using in that cloud. So it pulls the cloud low and in front, and it pulls the landscape low and in front. You see how that creates the illusion of perspective? The warmer, darker colors come forward, the cooler, lighter colors recede. That creates aerial perspective. Next, I'm going to put the darkest dark. This is, it looks like black in the camera, but it's actually a really deep blue. So it's more of a denim blue, very deep. On top of that dark, I'm putting a little bit of yellow, which seems like an odd combination, but yellow and black mixed together creates a kind of green, like a khaki green. So I'm using this to create that kind of greenish, dark greenish effect on the closer hill. I'm also negative space painting with some of the mist color behind it to create tree shapes and sky holes in the trees. So now you have a feel for that painting. If this was fun for you, join me every Wednesday night for our online classes through my website. They're live on Zoom. Thank you.